Every golfer has a round inside them waiting to get out. And we've explored how to encourage the coming out of that round using the systemic thinking that's right at the core of the Better Game Golf approach and the various two core approaches, Better Game Golf's the Golfing Body Mind and also Alexander Golf, both complementary but different. And we looked at both a model of integrated movement and some metaphors that explain the science. But now what we're going to talk about is a method to get you there. And it's the method we're going to talk about is quite simple. It's very rooted in scientific method. You plan to do something, you have a hypothesis, you do it, and then you see what you've done. You review it, and then what you learn from the review, you bring back and you plan again, do review, plan, do review. That's basic scientific method. Hypothesis, test, review, did it work, what didn't work. And that begins a process that should never end, really. No matter what heights you achieve, that process of continuous learning needs to keep carrying on. But there's one huge problem in golf and in terms of our senses, is that we've a tendency to rely on feeling, and the feeling, what's called the proprioceptive sense. And that gives you feedback to the brain about what's right and what's wrong. Now, one of the big problems is that this proprioceptive sense tells you what it's comfortable with, which is what it's already doing, its existing habits. The proprioceptive sense tells you what you're already comfortable doing, and in order for changes to happen, those deeply rooted habits of movement that are less than optimal, that are what we call satisficing, need to change. So relying on feelings doesn't work. It's vital to have feedback as to what's actually going on. And in the case of the Alexander technique, FM Alexander made huge use of mirrors. But what we have today is a very simple, very accessible tool, video. So what I'd like to suggest is your first investment is €25 or $30. Go out and buy a nice tripod on which to stick your smartphone with its video facility and video yourself. And what you'll find very often, it can be quite shocking because the proprioceptive sense is faulty. We have faulty sensory perception. You cannot rely on your body. You need to see what you're doing. So the use of a video is often brutal, but it's correct. Now, there are other more sophisticated ways of measuring. You can put little pads on all over the body and get even more detail. But the video is a very powerful start, and I'd suggest that this is your core tool, your core method is video. And video, not only your full swing with woods but also irons, but also video chipping, putting, bunker shots, and get some factual feedback as to what you are doing. Because what we're about here is changing deeply rooted unconscious habits, the habits of movement. Every golfer has a habitual way of playing. Now, the coach that helped Nick Faldo through his major changes was of the view that the average golfer was unable to change these deeply rooted habits of movement. But in Better Game Golf, we challenge that and say it is possible, but you need to be willing to look at some of the wider dimensions of movement, the movements of the body mind in everyday life. And we outlined how sitting, how you sit, how you walk, how you bend, how you breathe, how you twist in everyday life will be how you do it on the golf course. So the habitual way of doing, which is how you operate, that needs to change. So in terms of these deeply rooted habits, the method includes two vital tasks. One is inhibition. And what that means is you need to stop doing certain things that are not serving you well, that you habitually do. Habitual ways of moving, habitual ways of thinking, habitual ways of reacting, particularly under pressure. So I am not making this movement is an inhibiting thought. And that is a critical core part of this particular approach. But the second is to use the mind, and we'll get into this in a bit more depth, because how you use the mind is very important. And right at the core of this particular approach is directions of movement. And as we outlined in the model video and the analogy of the tent, is it's no good giving one direction, move the body in that, because this will counteract it, because it's uncomfortable moving. So there are always antagonistic pulls. You need to give more than one direction, particularly the ones that are to do with the stretching, the lengthening and the broadening of the muscles and fascia around the joints to free the body up. And this is new to many people. They're used to trying to implement one tip, but the means of delivering on the one tip is typically more than one direction. Because after all, the golf swing involves typically at each stage different parts of the body moving in different directions as well. You need the legs and knees, typically relatively, almost completely, the stabilizing functions, while the hips move in one direction, the thighs might be moving in the other, and the rib cage is moving in another as you twist. So being able to learn to give more than one directions, and you'll find that it is multiple directions at the same time, is a core component that makes this approach so effective and so special. Now, you will all be thinking at this stage, this is just overthinking. Well, yes, when you're out there performing, you do need to have moved beyond this. But if you're endeavoring to change your habits of integrated movement to a more optimal structure and a more optimal model, you do need to learn and apply inhibition, multiple directions at the same time, and go over it again and again until the new model becomes the new habitual and is one that you now have recourse to under pressure, rather than reverting to what you're comfortable with and what you once did. So that is the method. plan, do, review, and powerful use of video, but also the two methods of inhibition and direction.